In Parshas Vayishlach, we read about the message that Yaakov sent to Esav. He says, I lived in the house of Lavan, and I caused many people there to recognize God, and I am rich in cattle and in a donkey. Singular. The Medrash says that this donkey was used by Avraham. It was then used by Moshe, and it will be used by Moshiach. Because we're told that Moshiach will appear as a poor man riding a donkey. Moshe, on his way down to Egypt, rode a donkey, or with his family. And Avraham had the donkey that took him to the Akedah, to the binding of Yitzchak. So generally speaking, this donkey is a description of the times of Mashiach. But it began with Avraham. Why with Avraham? Because Avraham was the preparation for the giving of the Torah. The giving of the Torah revealed to us how to bring Mashiach. And 2,000 years or 3,000 years later, Mashiach actually comes. What is with this donkey? So we find an interesting thing. How did Avraham use the donkey? He put the wood, the firewood, for the binding of Isaac. He put it on the donkey, but he and Isaac walked. They went together. They walked together. The donkey was used to carry the wood. Moshe, when they were going down to Egypt, it says Moshe put his wife and children on the donkey, but he himself walked. Concerning Mashiach, it says that Mashiach himself will be riding on a donkey. Interesting, subtle differences. Avraham used the donkey only for the materials. Moshe used the donkey for people, but not for himself. Mashiach will use the donkey himself. So let's try to understand this. The donkey represents all things material. Actually, the Hebrew word for donkey is chamor, and the Hebrew word for material is chomer. Same letters. So the donkey represents the most physical, the most material aspect of this world. In the process of making the world godly, Avraham was able to benefit from the donkey, the process of elevating the physical, only by carrying that which is a preparation or an assist, a tool for godliness. The wood used for a sacrifice. But people would not be elevated by the act of the mitzvah, by the physicality. It only helped bring you to the mitzvah, but it didn't elevate you. In the times of Moshe, the donkey actually elevated the people that were close to you. Your family, your wife, your children. In other words, human beings. Because at the time of the giving of the Torah, the physical object used for a mitzvah actually became holy. With Mashiach, it's Mashiach himself riding on the donkey. So we could say that the difference is, in the times of Avraham, the physical served as a support for godliness, not for godliness itself. In the times of Moshe, with the giving of the Torah, the mitzvah actually elevated the human being because it became holy itself. It became holy when the human being did the mitzvah. So the human being benefited because the human being's efforts in doing the mitzvah brought the physical world, the physical substances, to godliness. It made the physical existence godly. So let's put it this way. The human being brought out, through the act of the mitzvah, brought out the godliness in the physical objects that he used for the mitzvah. You give $1 to charity, the dollar bill becomes godly. So the human being giving the charity brings out the potential godliness in the dollar bill. What's going to happen when Mashiach comes? When Mashiach comes, the body will have become, the physical, will have become so holy that it will inspire the person doing the mitzvah. Actually, there's a medrash that says that after Mashiach comes, if a person reaches out to pluck a fruit from a tree on Shabbos, which we're not allowed to do, the tree will say, it's Shabbos. In other words, the physical object will inspire the soul of the person. Today, the soul of the person elevates and inspires the physical object. In the times of Avraham, the physical object was not inspired and the human being could not inspire it. It was only useful as a support or a preparation, an assist in serving God. There's another story in this week's Parsha. Dinah, the daughter of Leah, went out to see the daughters of the land, the non-Jewish women. And the prince saw her, fell in love with her, abducted her, and wanted to marry her. Kidnapping is punishable by death. So Shimon and Levi, Dinah's brothers, who you don't mess with, they went and made a deal with all the men in Shechem that if they circumcise themselves, then they can marry, then the prince can marry Dinah, and Jewish men will then marry the women of Shechem, and the men of Shechem could marry Jewish women. They all agreed to be circumcised, and while they were recovering from the circumcision, Shimon and Levi by themselves went in and wiped out every adult male. Because kidnapping, rape is punishable by death, and every adult male was responsible to enforce the law in the land, and they didn't do it. At any rate, that's the simple version of the story. Dinah went out of the Jewish home, went looking, got into trouble. As a result, the brothers had to kill everybody in town. One big disaster. And who created this disaster? Dinah. What is the point of this story? So the commentaries say the Torah introduces Dinah as the daughter of Leah. Why doesn't it say the daughter of Yaakov? Why here is she identified by her mother rather than her father? So the commentaries say in the Talmud that the daughter, Dinah, was very much like her mother Leah. Her mother Leah also would go out, would wander about. She was given to visiting, to traveling. And so the daughter is like her mother. She also went out, and because she had the habit of going out, that's why all this trouble began. Very negative story. There's got to be more to it. The difference between Yaakov and Esav and Rachel and Leah. Everyone in town, I don't know which town, but everyone in town said Yitzchak has 2 sons. Lavan has 2 daughters. The older daughter will marry the older son. The younger daughter will marry the younger son. So everyone assumed that Esav is going to marry Leah and Yaakov is going to marry Rachel. And in fact, when Yaakov comes down to Haran and he sees Rachel, he says, this is the one I'm supposed to marry. So the Torah tells us that Leah had sad eyes, weeping eyes, and Rachel was beautiful and attractive. The difference in the spiritual level, crying is associated with regret and tshuva. Leah represented serving God through tshuva, the return to God. And that's accompanied with tears, generally speaking. Rachel, on the other hand, represents the tzaddik, who never sins, who doesn't know what sin is all about. And so she's already pretty. She doesn't have to get there through tears. The same difference of character and purpose existed between Esav and Yaakov. Esav was the ultimate Baal Tshuva. He would serve God by repenting, whereas Yaakov stayed in the tent of Torah study all his life. He was the tzaddik. We also find, very interestingly, Leah's children all sinned and had to do tshuva because they sold Joseph into slavery. And they regretted and repented, as we read in the whole drama of when they came down to Egypt, and Joseph tested them to see if they had had a change of heart. So they were all, in a sense, Balei Tshuva. Whereas Rachel's children, Yosef and Binyamin, were both tzaddikim. So Rachel represents the tzaddik, and Leah represents the Baal Tshuva. Esav is the Baal Tshuva, or is going to be when he does Tshuva, his descendants, whereas Yaakov is the tzaddik. So what happens? Leah would go out sightseeing. No, she would go out to reach those people, those women who were outside of the world of godliness. And she would help them do tshuva. Dinah, her daughter, learned from her mother and did the same thing. So it says she went out to see the behavior of the daughters of the land. Why did she want to see their behavior? She wanted to help them behave better. In the process, She was exposed to this prince who went crazy for her and raped her, and the whole story happened. If we look at it with a broader view, what actually happened was not all disaster. The attempt to bring godliness to where it didn't exist, which is the tshuva instinct or the tshuva process, actually worked. Look at what happened as a result of Dinah going out to inspire the daughters of Shechem. All the men of Shechem agreed to be circumcised. To be circumcised was the one mitzvah that existed at that time, in addition to the 7 Noahide laws. So by being circumcised, you kind of joined the family of Abraham, because the commandment to Avraham was that he should be circumcised and the members of his family. So when all the men of Shechem were circumcised, they now identified with Avraham and in a sense became his adopted sons. Godliness was introduced to the men of Shechem. And through that, all the women of Shechem. What does it mean that when you circumcise yourself, then your daughters could marry our sons? In other words, you can literally become part of the family. By doing tshuva, of course. So on a spiritual level, if we look more towards the consequence, the end result, rather than the symptoms, if you look at the symptoms, it all looks terrible. She was raped, they were killed, Jacob was angry at his sons for being so rash. It was all negative. But back off a little bit and take a broader look. A lot of good came from it. So to some degree, Dinah's purpose in going out was successful. But it wasn't pure. It wasn't completely successful. What was lacking? Generally speaking, women are the designers of the interior of life. The homemaker. What is a homemaker? The one who buys furniture? Well, technically, yes, but it means much more than that. All of life can be divided into internal and external. There's an internal life, private, intimate life, and then there's the social life, the external. The way we relate to people outside of ourselves, outside of our community, outside of our own tribe and nation. And then there's the interior, the internal, what's going on within ourselves, within our community, within our homes, within our hearts. Men are more responsible for the social and external relationships. How we affect other people, how we affect things outside the home. Whereas women are responsible for the interior. What's going on internally? The metaphor for that is what's going on at home, back at the ranch. What's going on within the family? What's going on in the heart of the family, in the hearts of the members of the family? However, you want to help other people with the internal issues of their internal life. Like if you give advice to people on how to make their marriages richer, holier, purer, what are you doing? On the one hand, You're going beyond your family. You're going beyond your tribe. You're talking to strangers, outsiders, outside. But what are you talking about? The inside. So women are obligated to reach out to total strangers, but to remind them and to help them with the interior part of their lives. In other words, by going out, you help people go in. When Dinah went out to help the other women, to inspire the other women, she was going to inspire them concerning their internal life, intimate subjects. But part of her presence in the public, it set off a reaction in the prince of the town and the men for whom everything is external. So there was a bit of a confusion there, and things didn't go exactly as they should. So the moral of the story is, women do have to take responsibility for people outside their immediate family. But when they do, it should be very clear that their purpose and intention is to improve the interior lives of people, not the exterior. So even as they go outside, they're really reaching inward. To some degree, men have to do that too. Even though men are talking about the outside, social needs, public needs, but every public need has to bring an improvement in your personal life as well. What was that famous expression? I loved it when I first heard it. In some show, they said, that man is a great doctor. And somebody said, yeah, but is that doctor a great man? A doctor helps people outside, total strangers. But if you're really helping society, if what you're offering is really helpful to society, it must also be reflected in the internal life within the family, within the individual. You can't create a schism. You can't say this is good for the public, it's a little harmful for the individual. Then you're not being very helpful. What's good for the public has to be good for the private. And what's good for the private should be known to the public. So women make known to the public what personal internal life is, and men who are there to improve social conditions have to make sure that that improvement is reflected in the family. That way we have a harmonious life, not dual loyalties, no conflict between the two.